Restless. I have to say, I really enjoyed the film. Uh,
Good.
and
I'm glad.
watching all these indies, they don't always have that that spark to keep our interest, but this one definitely did because I mean, we can all relate. We've all had those neighbors. I have one neighbor right now that I'm struggling with,
Oh no.
just live with, but it is what it is. Uh, as a writer, I understand you were inspired by a similar situation.
Yeah, pretty much. It was pretty much one of those ones that was kind of born out of lying awake at 4 a.m. with music pounding above my head, dreaming, thinking about, how far I would go to make this stop. Um, but then deciding to channel that into a story instead. And really kind of like the more I spoke to other people about what was happening to me and hearing their stories as well as what had happened to them, I just realized like this is such a universal story type theme. Like probably three-quarters of people in their lifetime are going to have experienced this, if not more. And I couldn't really think of many films that had tackled it either. Um, so yeah, very much kind of like born out of reality. I kind of stumbled across something that I think a lot of people can relate to.
So, any actions that you actually did that Nikki did in the film?
I can't tell you that on camera. Nah, I didn't. No, none of that. There were plenty of confrontations, but yeah, it's just not a nice situation to be in. Not being able to control when you can sleep is a living nightmare, basically. And yeah, that feeling of kind of like your home, the place that you're supposed to feel safe and you're supposed to be able to rest up for work, kind of being sort of taken away from you,
Mhm.
is a really sort of distressing feeling, that I wanted to try and kind of like capture through the movie.
Why did you make the main character a woman versus to a man? I mean, you were the one experiencing this.
Uh, it was mainly because it's mainly I was interested in like the dynamic between them. So I wanted these two characters that were kind of like at opposite ends of the spectrum. So rather than like two young guys with egos butting heads, it's more like these two completely opposite characters being forced on top of one another, was kind of the core of it. Um, so I wanted to have this lady that was very, very caring, very, very mild mannered on the surface of it, much more vulnerable looking than him, but also like a woman that was not going to basically lie down and take it, because it's the place that she lives and it means too much to her. Um, so yeah, I thought that was a more interesting dynamic. Um, and always as a writer, you're drawing on real things, right? So I grew up in a small town with a single mom, so you draw. I'm not saying the character's anything like my mom, but you draw on your background and the things that you know.
And you definitely made her vulnerable. I mean, she had a kitty, so
Yeah.
that always says something about someone when they have a pet. Uh, that's where I could relate to her because I'm a cat person. I have two cats. I love classical music, so I was like, I like her. I like her, regardless of who the other guy is. Talk about the music. This is another character in the film because you have, I mean, if anything, two types of personalities when it comes to the music.
100%. Well, the music basically kind of represents each of their personalities. You've got a person who's kind of more stable, more traditional, essentially has kind of lived maybe a slightly more old-fashioned life, who just wants peace and quiet. And then you've got this guy who's kind of unhinged and has kind of like no boundaries, basically, who's sort of represented by this collage of mainly quite horrible dance music. Um, but yeah, it was all about those two those two contrasts sort of clashing against each other. Um, we did a lot in terms of the music coming from next door. We put a lot of kind of a lot of emphasis on like constantly changing that music up. So like you can never, your brain actually, when you have like a set BPM, your brain actually can do quite a good job of blocking it out and putting it in the background. So what we did was made sure that we constantly change that music up. So it's like sometimes there's a nice rhythm to it. Sometimes it's just absolute horrible noise. The BPM's constantly up and down. And what it does over time is creates that kind of that feeling of anxiety, that sort of stomach churning feeling that she's going through. You can kind of feel it as you watch the film. That was the idea. But it did mean we had to license like a huge amount of music, way more than we thought we were going to. I think I can't remember what the final track count was, but I think it's like over 40 tracks. Something crazy like that in like an 88-minute movie.
Wow. That's
Yes, it's there's a lot of music.
Were you at that some point like, oh, maybe I should have used some other disruptive noise? Maybe not music. Would have been cheaper.
Yeah, probably would have been cheaper, but not as good and not as realistic.
I feel like it's another character. I feel it's the home, the building, the two homes in a way. But mainly obviously hers. So what were you looking for when you were hunting for location?
Well, we filmed on what's called a council estate here in the UK. So these homes were kind of like government built homes that are kind of like very generic. But people tended to, once you had one of these homes, you were assigned one of these homes, you stayed in it for a long time. So, and she has kind of been living in this sort of quite an old fashioned way where she had like her parents literally lived in the house next door, which gives everything this much bigger sense of jeopardy, right? Because she's literally, these buildings are her whole life. She's got a whole lifetime of memories, like within both of these places, and they're kind of being desecrated by this guy that's moved in next door. You've also got kind of, it's suggested in the film that her parents are not too long deceased. So you've kind of got that feeling almost that this guy is almost like a metaphor for the grief that she's feeling from what's, from the house next door as well. Just to kind of give it another layer.
We have all these other characters that kind of that tie in. I love that. So can you talk about the last scene and how you did like the slow motion? That was fascinating.
Yeah, well, that scene again kind of grew out of sort of. I wanted the film to start out feeling kind of like very realistic, and then basically I wanted to put you in Nikki's shoes. So as we're going through the film, as she's becoming more distressed, more sleep deprived, the whole thing is becoming much more heightened and basically builds to an almost kind of like operatic crescendo, like that goes with the music. That was the idea behind that. That you're kind of, by that point you're seeing everything through her eyes, and everything's kind of like ultra heightened and ultra vivid and ultra melodramatic just because of how sleep deprived she is.
I think that was amazing because you helped us as viewers, yes, putting us in a Nikki's shoes, but enjoy the
100%.
violence, I guess you could say,
Yeah, he deserves it by
for
that point.
everything she went through.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm a horrible person. See, I just said enjoying the violence.
Nah, he deserves it. We can't say why because of spoilers, but he definitely deserves it by that point.
Finding the perfect person to play Nikki. What were you looking for?
Um, so I was looking for. I mean, I already was a big fan of Lyndsey, so I had her in mind from quite early on. But I wanted someone who A was very, very natural and kind of a natural instinctive actor. Um, I was looking for someone that, again, on the outside had kind of a vulnerability to her. Like she's quite petite. She's got quite a sort of soft voice, but I also knew that she had that fight inside of her as well. Like when pushed against the wall, she's got that kind of that bit of bite to her. So that was really important. I also knew that she's in the UK a lot of actors and actresses kind of are from like very privileged backgrounds. They come up through very posh schools, they go to the big drama schools, and they come out a certain way, and that's fine. A lot of them are still amazing. But like she was someone that came from like a normal working class family and up in Manchester. Um so I wanted someone that understood the world outside of their bubble, that remembered ordinary life. And she kind of just ticked all of those boxes. Like I'd seen her in a film. I don't know if you've seen this film called Trespass Against Us. British movie. It got picked up by A24 in the early days of A24. But she's in that with Fassbender, with Brendan Gleeson, with Sean Harris, and she like more than holds her own against them. So I kind of always had her in mind as like this kind of slightly underrated talent, really. And was chuffed when I could get her.
And what about the dark comedy? It's like the dark comedy and integrating it, and in this story, which is more like angry, upset, frustration.
100%. But I think you need those moments sometimes. Those moments, of the dark humor, and there's a few bits of like silliness in it as well. I think sometimes you need those moments just to disperse the tension for a second so that you can let it build again. Yeah, but I think you're right. There is a lot of British humor in there, which I hope transcends and people get. But yeah, I definitely think a lot of my favorite movies manage to do that thing where they can tackle like quite heavy subject matter, but kind of they just ease the tension just at these different moments throughout the film.
Comedic and a serious matter, but in such a classy way.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like gallows humor, isn't it? I think that's what comes from living on a wet, windy rock in the middle of the sea. You kind of just have got to laugh sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for your time and congratulations, because Restless is going to be premiering June 9th.
Woo! Thank you so much. Nice to meet you, and thank you for having
Likewise.
me on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Lyndsey.
And I really